What is up, guys? It's Dylan, and today I thought I'd do something a little different. I've seen a lot of the comments. People have said, I have an iMac, or I want to buy an iMac. I see them on Craigslist, and I don't know what I can do with it or how I can upgrade it. I don't know how to get it to where you have yours. So today I'm going to be using this iMac G3 that I picked up off Craigslist. And I'm going to show you how you can upgrade it and get OS 10 on it and basically turn it into a productive computer that you can still use. This is one of the later iMacs. This is actually one of the more rare ones. This is the Blue Dalmatian. So today we're going to talk about 4 things that we can upgrade on the iMac to make it a more productive computer. The RAM, the hard drive, the operating system, and the logic board. So let's go ahead and open it up and go ahead and do some of these upgrades. Now, for demonstration purposes, this iMac is stock the way it came from Apple. It has macOS 9.2 on it, and it has all of its original configurations. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is, when you want to go to upgrade it, the first thing we're going to check is we are going to make sure that it has the latest firmware version. The easiest way to check to see what firmware version you have is to simply start up the computer while holding down the Option, Apple, O, and F keys. And what that's going to do is that is going to boot it up into what's called Open Firmware mode. And from there you can very, very easily check to see what firmware version you have. So we can see up in this top line here, it's a little hard to see in the video, but it does say 4.1.9. If it does not say 4.1.9, you will need to install macOS 9 onto the computer and run the firmware update. Directions on how to do that down in the description. This one is up to date, this one's ready to go, so what we're going to go ahead and do is shut this one down. So we are going to get started on the hardware upgrades. First thing you're going to want to do is going to unplug all of your peripherals, set them aside, and then you are going to reach back and unplug your power cord. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take your iMac, and what you want to do is you want to set down a towel or some kind of soft surface that you can use just to set the computer on. And what you're going to do is you are going to lay your iMac upside down with the smaller side facing towards you. Now, to do all of the upgrades that I've already previously mentioned, you're going to need a large Phillips screwdriver and a small Phillips screwdriver. If all you need to upgrade is the RAM in your iMac, what you're going to do is you're going to take this little slot right here, and you're just going to, you can stick a coin in it or really anything flat and just turn that, and then the door should just lift up, but sometimes it just needs a little prying, and then this will lift right up. So we can see inside of our iMac we have our 128 megabyte stick of RAM. The iMac will accept either PC100 or PC133 desktop RAM. That's 168 pin. I'll put some links in the description on where you can get that. The iMac will accept up to a gigabyte of RAM. I would recommend putting in at least 512 if you're looking at running macOS 10. 10.4 Tiger requires a minimum of 256. So if you're looking to run comfortably, 512 will do you just fine. I'm personally going to put a gigabyte in this model. What you're going to do is you're just going to push down on these 2 little tabs, and the RAM will come right out. And then I'm going to put my first 512 megabyte stick in. Just going to line it up with the pins and just push down on it until you hear those 2 clicks. And I'm just going to push the 2 tabs out on the other slot, match up the breaks in the pins, and I'm going to go ahead and put in that. Okay. And then I'm just going to take that and close it up. And that is all it takes to get to the RAM. So the next upgrade we're going to do is the hard drive. Now, depending on which iMac you can have anywhere from a 6 gigabyte hard drive to a 40 gigabyte hard drive. Now, regardless of which one you have, I would recommend upgrading it due to the fact that because the iMac does not have a fan, if you replace the hard drive with a newer quiet model, you can actually reduce the amount of noise that your iMac makes quite a bit. Your options for getting hard drives today, it does take a standard IDE hard drive. You can either buy yourself a new hard drive. I personally picked this one up. It's an 80 gigabyte drive from Western Digital. I personally got this one new off eBay for 20 bucks. Any standard IDE hard drive will work with it. So what we're going to do is, the first thing we're going to remove is we're going to remove this little door right here. If your iMac does not have a VGA port, or if it does, or it doesn't have this cover on it, some of them have different covers that cover this up. Either way, you're just going to slide something flat into this little slot here, and then this will just pop right out. Then what you're going to do is you're going to see 4 screws here. You only need to remove the 2 outer ones. The 2 inner ones go to the inner case, and you do not need to remove those. So we're just going to take our Phillips screwdriver. Now there are 2 more screws right on the top of the iMac, and those are both Phillips as well. So we're just going to take those out. Okay, so now you've got all of the screws removed from your iMac, and what we're going to do is we're going to take the bottom off. You're just going to lift it up from the bottom, and if you have not done this on your iMac before, or if it hasn't been done, you're going to hear a very loud snap when you do this. It can be a little scary, just because it sounds like plastic breaking. This one, there you go. Some it's a little bit tougher to get off than others. It just depends on which one you have and if it's been opened before. So here we have the opened iMac. And what we're going to do on this one is we are going to remove this metal mesh piece here. So what we're going to do is there are 6 screws on this iMac. There's going to be ones here, 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 and here. You should see them. They're all kind of around the edges except for these 2 where it's attached. So we're just going to pull those 6 out. Now once you've removed the 6 Phillips screws, what you're going to do is you're going to slide your hand into the cage here, and you're going to lift up, and then you can take your other hand here and just pull it up over the speakers, and you're just going to want to pull it out around this VGA port at the bottom, unless your iMac does not have it, in which it's a little bit easier to do. And now we have access to the rest of the computer. So you can see the hard drive is right here. So what we're going to do is we are going to disconnect the power cable and the data cable, and we are going to remove these 4 screws right here. These are just what holds the hard drive in place, so we'll just go ahead and take those out. And we're going to be using our small flathead, or small Phillips screwdriver for these. You cannot get these out with a larger one. If you try, you will strip the screws. So you will need a smaller Phillips screwdriver to get these out. Once you get to the last one, you just kind of want to hold the drive there so it doesn't fall down. And then what you do is, if you bend back this cable, just slide it out. So here's our original hard drive. And now we have our new Western Digital drive. When you do upgrade, I would recommend getting a 7200 RPM drive instead of a 5400, just because anything you can do to make this computer faster will help. I'm just going to slide that in, and we are going to get our screws. What you want to do with this is you want to put one of the back screws in first. You just want to line it up. You want to just screw that in. Just hold it up a little bit so you can get it in. And what you want to do is you don't want to screw it all the way in yet. You just want to leave it about 75% screwed in on all of them. That way you can kind of adjust it so it sits where it wants to. Because if you try and screw them all the way in, it might be too far back or too far forward, and then the rest of the screws won't go in. So you just want to make sure all the screws go in all the way, and then once it's lined up where it wants to be, you can take the rest of the screws and just screw them all the way down. Alright. Now, if you're not going to be replacing your logic board, you can just go ahead and plug those two cables back in. But we are going to go ahead and replace the logic board on this one. Before we go ahead and put the mesh cover back on, we want to make sure that all of our cables are thoroughly and 100% in. You want to check the optical drive and the main connection to the logic board especially, because those can easily be loose. And then you have to take it all apart to put those back down, which is not fun. So, now we're going to put our mesh cover back on. What we're going to do is we are just going to line it up. So now we're just going to take our mesh cover, and this can be a little tricky to get on. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to line it up with the back here where this VGA port is. And you want to get it over and onto the VGA port first. Line it up like that. And then what you're going to do is you're just going to fit it over the one side of the optical cage. And then sometimes what you need to do is you just need to pull this side out just so it'll go down in there. And then you just have to kind of work it back and forth. Sometimes a good firm press. Just kind of make sure that all of the holes are lining up, which in this case they're not quite. You just need to give a good little tap. Let's see. Okay, so once you've got that on, we just need to put all of the screws back into it. Also, having a magnetized screwdriver makes this a lot easier to do. So once you've got all of the screws in place, the last thing you want to do is put your bottom cover back on. Now, a lot of times this can get very dusty from years of use. This is all just plastic, so what you can do is you can either just take a moist rag, or if you want to just hose it out, if you just want to make sure it's thoroughly dry, and then you can just go ahead and line it up. You want to put it over the front of the computer first. You want to make sure that's lined up. And then I'm just going to make sure that all of the sides are in place, and it'll be a little loose just because it's not screwed down. And then I'm just going to put this back in. And then we're going to take our two big screws. Those are going to go in the bottom here. Just going to screw those down. And then we're just going to take our cover, and you want to take the side that has the two notches in it, and that's going to be the side that's facing the front. You want to put those in first, and then the easiest way to get this in is once you've got the top ones lined up, you just take the bottom one, just take your hand and snap it right into place. And then we're just going to close up our memory door. And then we're just going to take our two screws and put those in the front. Alright, so you've successfully done all of the hardware upgrades on your iMac. So we're just going to turn it back over. We're actually going to pull this off. You set it back down. You can really see the unique pattern that Apple did on this one. So now we're just going to take our power cord and reconnect that. Alright, and we have our iMac almost ready to go. Mac OS X, for the most part, came on a DVD. The latest version that the iMac G3 can run is Tiger. No, you cannot put Leopard on it at all. Leopard will not run on a G3 processor, so no matter what you try to attempt, it will not run Leopard. Now Tiger, for the most part, they sold it retail on DVDs, which is a problem because most of the iMacs only have CD players. If you have one of the original 5-flavor slot loading machines, and if it has a FireWire port on the side, then congratulations, you have a DVD player. If you have one of the early, one of the Indigo, Graphite, Ruby, or Sage, if you have one of the higher end models of those, then it's going to have a DVD player. If not, you just have a simple CD player or a CD burner. This one only has a CD burner on it, so how can you get Mac OS X on it? If you do not have another Mac in your house, you can use an external DVD player. You just have to have one that has the FireWire port on it. If you don't have one of these, but you do have another Mac in the house, what you can do is we can do something that's called FireWire target disk mode, and I'm going to demonstrate that now. So what you're going to need to do this is you're going to need a Mac with a DVD player, and you're going to need one that has a FireWire port. Regardless of whether or not it's an Intel machine or a PowerPC, it does not matter. I'm going to be using my MacBook Pro to do this. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your Tiger DVD, and you are going to put it into the computer with the DVD drive. Once you've got the DVD in the computer, what you're going to need is a FireWire cable. Mine has the new FireWire 800 on one end for my MacBook and the 400 for the iMac. If your Mac doesn't have an 800 port, you can just get the FireWire 400 to 400. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my FireWire cable and I'm going to plug it into the side of my MacBook. Then I'm going to take the other end and I'm going to plug it into the FireWire port on the iMac. Now what I'm going to do is I am going to shut down the MacBook, and once it's off I'm going to go ahead and turn on the MacBook. I'm going to press the power button and I'm going to hold down the T key. And what this is going to do is it's going to put the other computer into what's called FireWire target disk mode. And what this is going to allow is it's going to let you use it's going to let you see both the hard drive and the optical drive of your Mac on another computer. And so if you have nothing installed on your iMac, if you do have an empty hard drive, you can just boot this up and it will go ahead and power off of the CD that's in the other computer. If not, if you have OS 9 or something else, what you do is you turn it on while holding down the Option key. And what this is going to do is it's going to show you a list of all of the drives that the computer can boot off of. So we can see here is my copy of OS X that I already have installed on the new drive. And it's going to go ahead and scan. And we can see there is the installation DVD for Tiger. And if I had a copy of 10.4 Tiger on here, obviously I can't because it's a newer Intel Mac, but if I had one of those, if it was a PowerPC machine, I could hook it up and I could just boot directly off of the hard drive. Now, if you don't have an iMac with a DVD player, and you don't have another Mac with FireWire in the house, and you don't have a external DVD player that you can use, you are in the last category, which is the worst possible option, and that is you're going to have to find a copy of Mac OS X Tiger on CD. What Apple did is when Tiger came out, they understood that there were some iMacs that had CD players without DVD players, and they wanted to run Tiger. So what they did offer is they offered a kit. For $10 you could send in your DVD and they would mail you back 3 CDs. Now obviously because Apple no longer ships Tiger, they don't have this program anymore. So really the only way to get a set like this would be eBay or anywhere else online. Now these can be pretty pricey. If you've exhausted all your other options, if you can't find anything else, if you send me a message, if you tell me this, and if you're really, really awesome, I might be willing to mail you a set of my CDs. So those are your 3 options for getting OS X on your computer. So this one, what I went ahead and did is I use pre-made disk images that I go ahead and I run all the updates on one machine, I install the software I want to use, and then I can install that onto all of the computers. As you've seen in my repair and upgrade videos, I get batches of like 20 computers at a time, so I keep one disk image on my laptop and I can copy that onto all of the computers at once, whether it's through the FireWire port or if I have to open the machine up and take the hard drive out and connect it to my computer that way. If it doesn't have a FireWire port, that's how I'll do it. But this one already has 10.4 Tiger on it. It's got the new 600 MHz processor we installed. It has a gigabyte of RAM. It has the faster 80 gigabyte hard drive, and it's ready to go. So let's go ahead and power it up. Now, as soon as you hear that startup chime, that means that you've managed to get the RAM installed correctly. If you hear a long beep instead of the startup chime, then it means that you didn't install the RAM correctly, that it's not recognizing any RAM. If you get 3 beeps, that means it's bad RAM. In either case, make sure that you have them seated all the way in, and just make sure that they're either PC100 or PC133. And we can see it's with that new 1 gigabyte of RAM, it's starting up a lot faster, along with the faster hard drive and the faster processor. It makes the machine run a lot quicker. You can see the date and time has not been set on it, so we'll need to do that. And if you did not replace the time battery, usually, even if it is connected to the internet, every time it starts up, it'll usually tell you that. If you do have it connected into a high-speed connection, what it'll do is it's set to automatically check the time once it boots up. So, but if not, it'll retain it. Just a few other things to keep in mind. If you have one of the 350 or 400 megahertz models, if you're not going to upgrade that, probably the better operating system to put on it would be 10.3 Panther. It's not going to be as compatible with most of the apps that are out today, but it will run a lot better than 10.4 Tiger. Another thing is getting it onto the internet. All of the iMacs have a Ethernet port on them, but the slot loading models, all but one model, was a specialty one they made for a while, has a slot for an airport wireless card that you can put in it. It needs both the card that Apple sold and a little adapter board. You can usually pick these up for about $20, $25 on eBay. The problem is with these is that they only pick up 802.11b networks, so it will see G and N networks, and if it can connect to them, what it'll do is it will slow the whole network down to 802.11b, which you definitely don't want today. So what I would recommend is either just connecting it directly in through the Ethernet port. There are also some USB sticks that you can get that will pick up 802.11n networks, and usually you can get those cheaper than the actual airport card. Link for those in the description. One of the other things that I did not mention that you can upgrade is the optical drive. The problem with the optical drive is Apple uses a custom 5.5-inch slot loading drive for these, and nobody sells these anymore, and you can't put a standard slimline drive in it, and you can't put a standard tray loading one into these. So really your main option is, if you have one with a FireWire port, just go ahead and get yourself an external drive. You definitely want to get the FireWire one. These iMacs do not have USB 2.0 on them, so any USB kind of devices aren't going to run at full speed. Pin drives usually will copy stuff very, very slowly onto these machines just because they don't have USB 2. If your machine doesn't have a FireWire port and you want a DVD drive, I would most certainly recommend upgrading the logic board. You can get a logic board for about 20 bucks usually. If you are upgrading the logic board, one of the things to keep in mind is if you have one of the older ones, if the power button is both green and orange, if it's not one of the ones that has white, you'll also need to buy a new power button for it. One of the old ones will not work with a newer logic board. If you get a 500 or 600 megahertz, you are going to need the white power button. I'll put a link to that part number in the description too. And really, if you absolutely have to have an internal DVD drive, there is a company that does sell a super drive that you can install into one of these machines. Unfortunately, it's about $160, I believe. So unless unless you really, really, really want it and don't plan on selling the machine anytime soon, then go for it. But otherwise, it's really not worth it. So there you go. There's your brand new upgraded iMac G3. If you have any questions, have any problems, leave me a comment, video response, personal message. Just don't leave me channel comments because I never see those. If you really want to get in touch with me, the easiest way is a personal message through YouTube. I really hope it helped you out. I hope you can find an iMac, or if you have an iMac, you can get some more use out of it. And so that is my new iMac. I hope you have some fun with yours. I'll see you next video.